Welcome to the HIV podcast. Each week we focus on a person, historical event or pop culture moment linked to HIV and explore the story of what actually happened. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Jess, and between us we've been working in the field of HIV for 40 years. Our aim is to get as many people as possible HIV educated.
Welcome to the HIV podcast.
So have you forgiven me for last week's intro yet, Sarah?
No.
Okay, I still don't want to hear about the holiday. We're British and you don't seem to understand that. So when I say, did you have a good holiday? You can just go, yeah, it was great. And that's it.
Right, okay. Well, equally, I don't want to hear about your holiday either. We'll just move on.
Well, it's good that we're moving on. We've got exciting news. We're actually very busy, and we have been for the last few weeks, being judges. We're being judgy bastards, aren't we?
I'm not being a bastard.
Oh, that's just a saying, though.
But I am being judgy.
Yes, yeah, we are. So just to elaborate a bit, we're not really judgy bastards. I'm just having some fun. We've been invited back for a second year because our judginess is so great to the British Podcast Awards to be judges. And you can actually go on their website and you can find us. We're listed on there as judges.
A lot of judging to do.
Yeah, I'm loving it. I think I could just be a judge always. I think that's what I might do. Just go into a career in judging.
You're just going to judge all aspects of our society from now on.
Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm a very positive judge. I like
Yeah.
it. I'm a kind judge, but a judge nonetheless.
If only you got a judge's salary.
Oh, God, imagine.
They are paid a lot of money. I mean, I believe they have to do a lot of training as well. But, you know, something to aim for.
Right, exactly. Maybe my next career move.
Oh, yeah, with the curly-whirly wig.
I'd look good. I'd look good in that. I think
you would. I think you would too, yes.
I could get away with that. I think, a white, tight perm would suit me. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, there's not many people that would suit, but you could carry that off.
I can get away with this. I wanted to talk about a little bit.
Mm.
And
My holiday.
No, absolutely not. Moving on. Don't make me mute you again. I know you did not enjoy that. I mean, the rage on Sarah's face, realising she'd been faded out. We won't do that again. No. In other very exciting journalistic news, Sarah, I know you love a different hat to wear all the time, right? You've had different careers throughout the entire time on this podcast. I mean, you were a doctor. You were I want to say a cosmonaut. You're a cosmonaut at one point, weren't you?
Absolutely.
You've had many different roles.
Historian,
and now that's it. That
activist,
is one. Yeah,
advocist. Is advocist a word? I think I've made that up.
I like it though.
Yeah, lots of. I'm very adaptable.
I've got a new one for you. We're now journalists.
Who are we working for? Don't say the Daily Mail.
God, no, Jesus, absolutely not. No, so we've basically been granted a press pass to attend the International AIDS Conference. Now, before everyone thinks we're jet setters and we're flying off to Germany, we're not. We've got a pass to the virtual one.
We don't have funds for that.
No, absolutely not. So it'll just be us sitting, but we will be making some podcast episodes about what actually happens at an International AIDS Conference, posting about updates and videos and things like that. How very exciting.
It is, but I would just like to point out to the International AIDS Society that if you want to be inclusive to all voluntary organisations and all stakeholders within the HIV sector, just lower your prices.
It was a little steep. I'll just say that. We won't go into how much, but even for the virtual entry, a little steep. We're just saying a suggestion, guys. Have a think, maybe. Because actually we wouldn't have been able to attend if we weren't going as the HIV podcast.
We couldn't have justified spending that amount of money, and it would have been thousands if you include the flights and the accommodation and everything else.
So, right, we absolutely wouldn't have been able to, because we had a picnic the other day and I had to make the sandwiches because we didn't have a very big budget. That is how low our budget is. We're having just sandwiches. Although everyone said how amazing they were and said I should open a sandwich shop. And I said, I'm going to call it Forget About It. Do you like that? Oh,
look at the tumbleweed everywhere. Oh, it's making me claustrophobic. There's so much of it.
I love that. Forget about it. Anyway, not really. But yeah, apparently people like my sandwiches. But yes, pricey, but it will be good for us to go. Are you going to take an old school notebook like a journalist and lick your pen like this? Are you going to do that?
And also, don't they wear trilby hats? Oh, Should get one of those.
Oh, I suppose with the card in it that says press.
Yes.
I feel like
I mean, I'm going back to the 1950s, aren't I?
I was going to say.
Let's bring that back.
Why not? So you're just going to have a hat and a notepad?
I'm going to have a pencil and they lick the end of it and then start writing.
Why did they lick the end of it?
I don't know. Maybe you could get high off the lead or something. I don't know.
Oh, we should mention we've got a guest today. Before I forget, it's because I haven't seen you. So this is our second episode back together. I'm just off.
Anyway, enough talking about lead poisoning. And I'm sure everyone's completely fascinated and invested in that. But let's get on because we have a guest today. Okay, this week's guest is one of the driving forces in our sector, making sure the voices of people living with HIV are heard, that their views are represented, and most importantly, he makes change happen. Now, that might sound a bit weird, but trust me, in our sector, there's sometimes a lot of talk, but not much action. We're very pleased to welcome Alex Sparrowhawk.
Hey.
Yeah. Otherwise, it falls a bit flat, doesn't it? We're both just looking at you going,
yeah, sorry. We would cheer. I explain this to everyone that comes on. We would cheer, but our microphones seem to see that as some sort of interference. So it just silences it. So we are cheering that you're here. And welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Now, first of all, I did a bit of LinkedIn stalking, Alex.
I bet he knows. LinkedIn tells you, Sarah. He'll know that you've been stalking him. It will have told him. Sarah doesn't know about these things. See, it's blowing her mind already.
I don't use LinkedIn, but I did for this. So I know that you used to work in the insurance sector and you took the big leap into the HIV sector. That is quite a difference. That's a big leap.
Just one of them opportunities where I knew that the role that I could basically move into at THT, it's not something that was going to be around forever. And it was something that I always thought about, I'd like to move into that space at some point. But I'd always thought that would be later on in my career as a kind of a bit of a step down when I was older sort of thing. Very much realised that actually working for a charity isn't relaxed in any way at all. And actually it's really hard graft. I've loved every minute of kind of working in this space and being able to amplify those voices, being able to kind of be part of the movement that has, been changing things. And even, since 2015, where we've come to now, it's just incredible when you look back and all the different things that have happened in that time. It's crazy, really.
Yeah, and you've been a big part of that. So I can understand where you say that, it is really hard work working for a charity and especially in the roles that you've had where you've been driving forward and kind of pushing through change. Jess and me, hard work, but not so much of the activism, are we, Jess?
We've got a podcast. What more can we do?
Oh, that's very true, actually. Yeah. I always think, yeah. Yeah, but
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Alex, you're sort of I want to say you're a bit of a celebrity in our industry. So we know your name, everyone knows your name. Yeah, you're just like Sarah saying, you've done so much to make so much change and you've been involved in so many different aspects of HIV and driving change forward that yes, it's just, obviously I've had emails from you for so many years around campaigns to do with THT. So it's so nice to have you on. It's have you face to face rather than just via email.
Wow. I think Jess is your biggest stalker. We can talk about that later, Alex. We'll get rid of her and I can put your mind at ease. Okay, so when we talk about change, we should point out some of the biggest projects you've worked on are HIV and ageing, the HIV prevention programme and Positive Voices report, which is what we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, that was a really exciting piece of work to be involved with. I think kind of being the other side of research sometimes and being a member of the community who, I do tend to actually take part in things because I've got an interest in it, but kind of being that kind of behind the scenes, if you like, and all the work that goes into those kind of things, it's incredible. And we actually started talking about that survey all the way back in 2019, so 5 years ago now, and we've published the results at the start of this year, but that's kind of the length of time that it can take just to look back at the previous survey that was done. And for people who don't know about it, it's basically the biggest survey of people living with HIV in the UK. So it's really important because it's just the impact that it has the potential to have is just incredible, having that much. It's representative of 1 in 20 people living with HIV across the country. So it really does kind of build a picture of what everyone is experiencing.
Yeah. And when you say a lot of people are involved, it's over 4,500 people living with HIV contributed to this survey. through their HIV clinics?
Yeah, that's right. So there was 101 clinics who helped to recruit people to take part. And, you know, that's like a lot of work in itself as well, just like all the coordination behind that. And we know, you know, not everyone's interested in research. And I think people living with HIV are probably some of the most over-researched groups or populations.
Yes.
There's, you know, kind of things entering like flying past your inboxes or you hear about all the time. And it's a long survey as well. So for the people that did take part, like, we are really grateful because it is just so important, and it's got the potential to have so much impact and, you know, help us change, you know, how services are delivered, make us, like, you know, aware of what people are still experiencing. And unfortunately, you know, there are quite a few, you know, issues that have emerged from the results of that. You know, that we know we've still got a long way to go in terms of making sure that everyone can thrive with HIV and not just survive.
Yes, very true. And for people who aren't aware of the survey, you are covering things like HIV knowledge, diagnosis and treatment, quality of life, health and well-being, how satisfied they are with their health care, how their general health is, but also looking at other things like housing, work, finances, unmet need, and the impact of COVID. It's very comprehensive, but every single kind of topic is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it does just build that picture. And the way I like to think of it is having more than 4,500 people taking part. It's a way of us capturing kind of like 4,500, you know, stories, experiences in a way that, you know, wouldn't be possible to do just by kind of trying to talk to everyone, or, you know, there's just not enough kind of like, you know, space for people to kind of just share that information freely, I guess, or like the ability to as well. The other good thing about research is how, you know, it's private, anonymized, so people can, you know, share what they're thinking without, you know, having to be open about their status or, you know, worried that someone can trace something back to them, because it's kind of like, you know, you're building into a bigger picture, if you like.
Okay. And did you collate all the responses? Did you have to trawl through 4,000?
Luckily, I didn't personally have to handle the results management side of things, but there's a fantastic team at UKHSA that kind of deal with all that stuff, and UCL as well. And they're the teams that kind of like check everything. And, you know, there's a lot of kind of technical aspects to it. So some people did the survey online, so that's quite easy to manage those results, but lots of people take part on paper. And I think that's really important that we, you know, had that option available still, you know, that people who aren't tech savvy, or, you know, especially because it was given out in clinics, it just, for some people, it would have been something for them to have done while they were waiting for an appointment, or, you know, they might have been to see the doctor and then they're waiting to see the nurse for their bloods or something. And it was just that kind of like to capture that snapshot in time of that in that moment. Yeah. And just be able to kind of, you know, draw from that what's going on in the community. And some of it's obvious, but there were some things that were surprising. And, you know, I think sometimes, especially for those of us who work in this space, we can kind of almost be too close to some of the topics sometimes. And, you know, we can get fatigued by them. You know, U equals U is a classic one where we feel like that message has been like, you know, we hear it like probably day in, day out, but actually there's still people out there who don't know the message, don't understand the message, don't trust that message. So it's, you know, it's one of them times where you're reminded that not everyone is as like privileged as you to be accessing like HIV information, you know, day in, day out in a way that they can understand it.
Yeah, we talk about that quite a bit, actually, don't we, Sarah, here, about sort of we all need to have the same level of HIV education. There are so many people who don't, like you're saying, have that knowledge around things like U equals U, or even some just basic HIV knowledge. We need to get everyone to the same level, and then we can start moving forward, you know? And that's the important thing, isn't it?
So in the survey, I think it was 93% of people knew what HIV was, but only about 65% fully trusted it. And you're more likely to not fully trust the message if you were an older adult, if you were Black, if you were heterosexual. So it's just those kind of things that just make you stop and think of how what are those kind of groups of people potentially missing out on as well, and kind of like access that like equity angle, and like, you know, making sure that everyone's able to access the same information and understand it in the same way, but also, you know, looking at what's underneath that. And I think definitely from my experience, for example, so I left THT in March, and the last role I was doing there before I joined George House Trust was HIV and aging. And definitely like a lot of older heterosexual people weren't in relationships, and some of them hadn't had a relationship, like whether it was like romantic or casual, for over 10 years. And it's just to think about what impact that might have on that person's well-being and their health and those kind of things. And I think it's just making sure that everyone, has the ability to access services that might help them think about what are the barriers? Are they things inside themselves? Is it outside pressures? It's so complex. When you get down to an individual level, everyone's different. Everyone has different ways they respond to living with HIV. And I think sometimes, especially for people who've been living with it for a longer time, you can get kind of just used to what their normal is, if you like, and actually maybe sometimes don't even recognize that maybe they could be, thriving in a different way, or, just giving them that boost of confidence to maybe address some of the internalized stigma that's going on. But it's so difficult.
I think you're right. And I think Jess and I have talked about this before. This is the first generation to live into old age with HIV, which is something to celebrate. This has not happened before. Yeah. But in doing so, I think we sometimes tend to think, well, they're fine because they've lived with HIV for so long. And we forget that they experience inequalities just like other people that are living with HIV. But we perhaps prioritise newly diagnosed people before them because they're newly diagnosed. And I think what this report does is highlights the inequalities that anyone living with HIV faces.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something in particular about people who were diagnosed in like the 80s and 90s as well, that we often talk about them being guinea pigs around treatment and things like that. We don't think about how they've been guinea pigs for everything else as well. Every single time there's a change in the health service, or there's a change in how HIV support services are delivered, or cuts to funding, all those kind of things. They've bore the brunt of all of those throughout their diagnosis as well, like more so than any other group. And it's as a kind of a group, if you like, they're actually, that takes a lot of resilience to kind of like handle that. And that's a lot of pressure for people to take on. And I think maybe those of us who were diagnosed later, like myself was in 2009, it's about reflecting about how much that group have actually done for us, and whether they even recognize that themselves or not. They really have like paved a way for the rest of us to receive amazing care. And that's something that was actually really highlighted in the survey as well. So one of the questions, we asked people to rate their HIV clinic out of 10, and the average score was actually 9.4. So it just shows you like how amazing much I think like we are thankful to the HIV doctors, the HIV nurses, the health assistants, everyone that's involved in the HIV clinic, and all the amazing work that they do. And especially, kind of the current pressures on the workforce and the NHS at the moment, and everything that's going on with that. I think I really hope that the clinics, especially the ones that took part, but all of them, recognize how much we do appreciate what they do for us when we go and see them every 6 months or every year, how often ever it is.
And people feel, from what we hear from our service users, so supported by their clinics. Like you're saying, it's not just that you're getting rushed through, they really do feel that they are getting really good care and support from all the clinics that we work with.
Yeah, I just think it's a safe space for so many people, and you can kind of put HIV aside a lot of the time if you want to, other than like to kind of take your medication. And it's really those appointments that's like, I guess, the time of year or a pinpoint in time where your status is at the forefront again. And I think so it is really important that you can feel like looked after, cared for, listened to, when you have that, that it might only be like 10, 20 minutes with the doctor or the nurse or whoever it is that you're seeing, but just to have that time to kind of either say that life's going great, or just to unload what problems you might be having.
Yeah, because for some people, the healthcare professionals are the only people they talk to about their diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that everybody rates their clinical care so highly probably reflects that, because I think they go above and beyond. But when you look at all the services operated or offered by the NHS, I always think sexual health clinics come at the bottom of the pile. It's like they're not as valued, or people don't see the value of them as much as some other services.
I think definitely in terms of like funding or necessity, or even public opinion. And I think it's HIV services are kind of a little bit protected in terms of how they're funded compared to sexual health, because they're always in the same, or they tend to be in the same space. There's still that impact there, because you've got doctors working across both areas. And there's still that stigma as well of like even attending a sexual health clinic. I think we have this weird mindset, like culturally and socially, of like, we don't judge people for like going to a dentist. We just see it as like, okay, it's someone looking after their teeth. We don't judge people going to the opticians. They're looking after their health of their eyes. But then when they go to a sexual health clinic, there's that like loaded judgment of like, oh, they must be doing something they shouldn't be, or and that even that like that narrative, it's really complex. It's really interesting how that view that we kind of like.
It's so true, isn't it? We're really good at talking about physical health. We're much better now talking about mental health, but sexual health is an absolute no-no still. With all the judgments that go with it. And it's one of the biggest barriers, I think, to people accessing a sexual health clinic is that fear of being seen and somebody going, what are you doing here? It's linked to kind of, I think, our attitude towards sex as well, probably. And that we just don't talk about these things.
Well, we had Dr. Kate Lister on a couple of weeks ago, and she was brilliant. And she was talking about where this kind of British attitude around sex has come from and how it's sort of this hangover from Victorian times. It was so fascinating, wasn't it, Sarah? But it was this whole thing of, well, I'm not like, I would never do that. And what are they up to? And it's this whole, I don't know how we shift it because it's just not going anywhere, is it? Those sorts of attitudes.
Yeah, and they're even in I try not to use like techie language. If you want to talk about like sexual networks, it even exists within them spaces where even when you've got people who are having a lot of sex and they're seeing other people having a lot of sex, they're still judging each other as well. Even even in them kind of like environments, it's like there's not. It's so, I don't know. There's like obviously some sort of like collective psychological issue behind it all, but it is just that's just one of them things that I think that it does. You're right. It creates a barrier to people getting tested in the first place. Is having worked in this kind of space now for so long, it kind of shouldn't shock me. But meeting people, especially like old adults, and then finding out they've never even like had a test or they've never been tested, and it's not because they're not doing things that they shouldn't, sort of thing. There's like often like they should be getting tested, and definitely when it comes to HIV, we see so many late diagnoses in older people and that kind of thing, because there's such assumptions. I think probably because I think it's like a well-known thing that younger people have higher rates of things like chlamydia, for example, and then I think people assume that all STIs or anything that's sexually transmitted is going to be the same. But actually with HIV, definitely in 2022 more people were diagnosed over the age of 50 than were under 25, but older adults are kind of just like, oh, that's a young people thing. And I've done outreach and stuff at different like events and festivals and things, and they'll start talking to like men and women who might be in their like 30s, 40s, 50s about PrEP, for example, so the HIV prevention pill, and they're like turn around like, oh yeah, that's great, are you telling the young people about this? And I'm like, well yeah, but I'm also telling you about it. And it's like there's this complete like lack of awareness that it's something that they should have some knowledge of, or think like, oh, is this something that could be for me? And maybe it isn't, but maybe it is, and it's almost like a shutdown immediately of like, oh no, sexual health, STIs, that's like young people, students, or people that going out on a Saturday night drinking too much and and whatever happens next, sort of thing.
It's so true. Having grown up in the 80s, where obviously had the HIV and the AIDS epidemic, but of course that being nothing to do, that was all to do with gay people, it was nothing to do with me. I was at school, and then whilst being at school, your sex education focuses very heavily on not getting pregnant. Never about STIs. And I think for my generation that still stands, and now we're kind of menopausal or postmenopausal, don't have to worry about getting pregnant, but it never occurs to anyone, I think, of my age, actually, you could contract HIV, because it's almost entrenched in us that HIV is a gay disease. That's what we were taught in the 80s. And because we can't get pregnant, we're good to have a good time now. And we see this, don't we, Jess, at the drop-in when we have new referrals that are older people, older women, that it's much more devastating for them than it is for some of our younger people to kind of come to terms with.
Yeah.
Because they had no idea that they were even at risk.
That's right. We're seeing like quite a lot of this. Like I joined George House Trust 2 months ago, and we're really well linked with the clinics across like Greater Manchester and Liverpool. And obviously with the kind of bigger rollout now of emergency departments, opt-out testing in A&E, we're seeing a lot more people who aren't expecting a diagnosis as well. So it's that thing of, I think if you are testing regularly and using a sexual health service, you've always going to have something in the back of your mind of like, oh, the result might be positive, even if it's like a tiny percent in your head. Whereas if you're going into A&E with like, I don't know, a broken leg, or you've been really nauseous for days on end kind of thing, and it might be that they fix that problem, but at the same time you're then told, oh, by the way, you're HIV positive. It's that's an additional thing that you weren't expecting to take on, and
that you weren't prepared for.
And we're learning about how those people want to access support and seek support. And it's taking them maybe in general like a little bit longer to kind of engage in services and things like that. I think because there is like a bigger shock to them in getting that news.
Massively, yeah, I think so. We've seen it, sort of that exact thing happen, devastate families, literally, where we've had also someone who wasn't expecting the diagnosis. They're in hospital, they're found out, and we've had to sort of provide, do you remember, Sarah, sort of family counselling and all sorts, because it was something huge that they weren't expecting. And even trying to navigate sexual health services or access, support was just mind-blowing. And yeah, it just tore this family apart. It was, really
yeah,
sad.
and I think it goes back to kind of like knowledge and things like that, because I think it just takes that much longer time to kind of reassure people that actually, it sounds stupid, but it's a good thing that you're aware of your status now, because now we can start your treatment immediately. It'll work really well. It'll help with like if you've been unwell, particularly if it's like not been like an accident, if it's been like a repeated like health issues and things like that. Actually, the best thing that can happen now is you start HIV treatment, and actually that's going to help your immune system and get all these things under control and stuff like that. But it is, it's so much information to take on, and it's easy. I think again, it kind of thinking back to having the privilege of working in this space and being able to like access information that comes through and understand it and have more time to kind of like learn about it. When you're kind of, if you work in a out there doing anything from like retail office work, and then you get a diagnosis and you're trying to like, learn all the ins and outs about HIV in your spare time, probably privately to begin with anyway, especially like without other people knowing that you're like researching it and that kind of thing. It's, it's stressful.
Really stressful. And I think, as you said, if you've been diagnosed in a setting where you weren't even expecting to be tested, that's an added layer of stress trying to get your head around that, because there must be people who go, well, they've just made a mistake. It just couldn't possibly be happening to me, so I'm just not going to acknowledge it.
Yeah, we do find that most, like, everyone's always, I think once the initial shock subsides, they're so glad that they finally, and actually where we get people who are angry, it's more angry that they weren't tested early. They're like, but I've been here before, or I've been seeing my GP like 100 times. How come no one's checked this until now? Like, why am I only finding out now? Like, especially if they're told like, oh, you may have had this for like 5 years or something. It's that kind of, it's a great initiative that's coming out now. And it's, the fact that it's rolling out in more places is a really positive thing as well.
Yes. So it's coming to our area, to Berkshire, to the 3 hospitals within our patch shortly. I think September's the first launch date.
Yeah, just to clarify, we're talking about the rollout of it's opt-out HIV testing in A&Es, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah. Just to clarify, yeah.
So yes, so interesting times ahead. So may need to speak to you, Alex, just to offload my concerns about the increased workload, or maybe not. I mean, it's really good because this is already happening. The George House Trust have been involved in the initial pilot.
Yeah, so it's been happening in certain areas in Manchester already, so like Manchester and Salford, and then we're kind of working with the hospitals and the clinic teams. So over the next kind of like year, it's going to be launching in other areas of Greater Manchester and also in Liverpool as well. So we're kind of, we've already learned a lot from the kind of initial work from like the ED departments emergency departments in Manchester and Salford, and just like applying that. And the good thing that I think maybe not everyone's aware is that the kind of tests are sent to like the sexual health clinics to then contact the people who do have a positive result, and that means that they're kind of linked into care straight away, and then they can refer people to services like ours, for example, in the same way they would with other clients. And we just get them to, like, when they're sending their referrals over to us, for example, they just tick a box that says it was a diagnosis via emergency departments. Then we've just got that added information to know, like, okay, this is someone who might not have been expecting this diagnosis, that kind of thing.
Excellent. We're going to have to pick your brains in the future. I know we are. And George House Trust, always leading the way, always. They're very, very client focused, aren't they? Or service user focused. I don't know how you refer to.
Yeah, it's an amazing organisation. So I've lived in Manchester for 18 years now, and I was diagnosed in 2009, and I was referred to George House Trust all the way back then, so almost 15 years ago. And so I've always had like a love for the organisation, and the role I'm doing now, which is managing the different services in the organisation, like became available at the start of the year, and I sort of thought, oh, I've been at Terrence Higgins Trust then about just over 8 years, and I was like, well, maybe it's time for something different, and local on my doorstep, an organisation that I'm really always been proud of, and yeah, I'm really loving. I'm kind of just over 2 months in now, and the team's amazing, and there's just a great, as you said, like there's a great atmosphere, and like everyone's like involved and connected really well, and the team that I manage are all doing really different work, but all it's all really important. So a lot of like work kind of intensive in communities, helping people who've stopped taking treatment kind of get back into treatment, people helping families, service advisors who are helping people with all sorts of those kind of like all them unmet needs that popped up in the Positive Voices report. They're like they're helping people with all that stuff, the housing things, the anything around welfare benefits, that kind of stuff. So it's all important work, but yeah, there's just an energy to the center, and just it feels very connected, and they're not afraid to tackle important issues and are really listening. There's a great project at the moment where we're working with sort of like beauticians and things like that to get HIV removed off the kind of like consent forms when people might be having like minor procedures, like things like Botox, that kind of stuff. Because we started to get a lot of people contacting us saying like, oh, like HIV is always on the form, and then either people were being denied options and things like that. And it's just been around like educating, and we're working with a beautician who works in that industry, which has been really powerful as well, because that kind of peer-to-peer sort of like them listening to someone else who's from within their kind of like sector, their circle, they'll listen more than us kind of like just like waving the finger at them and telling them they're doing something wrong and that kind of thing. And just having that kind of ability to really be like listening to the issues that people are coming to us with and being able to take action quickly is something that I just really like about the organization, how like fast they are to respond to those kind of like emerging issues and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because you have to be rapid with those things, don't you? We see the same thing. You have to be able to respond to like emerging trends in that way. It can't be 10,000 meetings and then we might start thinking about putting a policy in place, and then it's like, oh no, now it's something different. It's like, okay, we're going to react right now. But yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's just this, I think it's because it's things that impact people's lives as well, and it's just something as simple as like someone just wants to make themselves feel a bit better, like by having like some filler or something, then why not, sort of thing. And then it's about just enabling them to like if they're HIV negative friends doing it, it's just like giving them that same opportunities.
Again, it's the equality thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
they shouldn't be stigmatized in this day and age because of HIV. Okay, oh Alex, look, you're just creating change wherever you go. This is just like your forte, isn't it? Are you like that in life? Are all your friends like, oh, we're not happy? Can you help us change our lives?
I think a lot of it is just how I was brought up. I think I was brought up in a space where it was often about like helping others and like being involved in like local communities. We were kind of like, I was raised Catholic, and it was very much like involved with like the church and like the schools and things like that. And I think it's just how we are. There's something in the family that just wants to connect to other people and help out communities and things like that. I'm a little bit like it outside of the HIV space as well, get involved in like things going on locally where I live and that kind of thing. I think my boyfriend would probably say I'm like a busybody, but I think I prefer your like change definition.
Yeah, you'll have to keep playing that to him. Not a busybody. Go back and listen to that episode. Was what she said.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, to kind of finish, I mean, you've got extensive knowledge of our sector. How would you like to see the sector move forward? What would you like our priorities to be?
I think for me, it's just continuing to support people with HIV, recognise what those needs are for the people to, like enable them to thrive. And I think when it comes to stigma, I think we need to recognise that it's, we've got things that we need to change out there in society, but we've also got a lot of work to do in kind of building up, I guess, like resilience for people, that dealing with that internalized those issues as well. But also, I got challenged on this by a volunteer who's in with HIV last week when I was talking to her at George House Trust. And it's not just about building up that resilience and enabling people to feel more confident and empowered. It's also then kind of like helping them to know what's next. There's no point in kind of like building someone up and then they're just like and now what? It's like, helping people, I think, focus on what like a future might look like, whether it's like anything's connected to HIV or not. I think there's that element that maybe we're not thinking about, and enabling people to, maybe catch up with like a life they've lost a little bit if they've had, been dwelling on things too much and too seriously.
Yes, I actually fully agree with what you're saying. Actually, that's a really good kind of point. It's like what happens next. I think there are some really good, strong campaigns at the moment, but there isn't as much planning or thought about, well, what happens after that kind of campaign gets its legs, so to speak. And, we focus quite heavily on changing the opinions of, general public.
Yeah.
Don't always think about the impact on the HIV population. I'm thinking of, zero transmissions by 2030. It's quite a powerful mission to have, but it's not been that popular with our service users because they feel stigmatized.
Yeah, and there's definitely that element of, it'll be fantastic if we can stop new cases, but those of us who live with HIV are still going to be around.
Well, this is it. It's like, it is like, well, what about all of us?
Yeah, and it's
what do you live with it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's good to know we're on the same page, because I think sometimes we just feel like, but I think, and I don't know, you've worked on both sides, so to speak, kind of doing the policy, the advocacy, but maybe behind the scenes, and now much more a frontline service. We both obviously work in frontline service. And I think sometimes the differences between what's trying to be achieved with the policy side of things is very different from what we're experiencing on the front line.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. And I think it is, I think both are important, and it's just around, I think there's that constant, there's a lot of, I think within the HIV sector, there's a lot of kind of times where certain messages clash with each other, and I think there's the classic one is like, get tested because you'll live an amazing life, and and then we're also at the same time saying like, and people are aging with HIV though, and they're having more health complications because of comorbidities and other issues. And there's like, some things don't always like tie up together neatly as we like them to. But I think it's just about sometimes taking a step back and just thinking, we want to say a certain message to certain groups of people or to the general public, because that's going to help us fight stigma, but not doing it in a way that doesn't alienate people who are living with HIV and that kind of thing. And I think that's easily achievable, but it's about taking the community and people with HIV with you on that journey and making them understand why sometimes we say things a certain way and sometimes we don't.
That's it. No, absolutely. And I think valuing their lived experience.
Yeah,
because,
definitely.
That is what has got us to where we are now. And we need to take that forward as well.
Yeah.
Oh, Alex, do you know what? It's been so good to talk to you. You are so inspiring to Jess and I. So we thank you for that. I hope you've been.
He knows how I feel. I told him at the start of the episode, Sarah. Everyone heard me gushing.
Pipe down, you stalker.
I do have a non-HIV related question.
Oh no, we can edit this, Alex.
Alex, do you have like reptiles or something? I've been fascinated by the tanks behind you.
I have. So in the tanks behind me, I've actually got insects. I've got millipedes, praying mantises, and beetles. But I also do have 2 leopard geckos and a crested gecko as well. There we go.
Wow,
millipede! Did you say millipedes?
Yeah.
Are they even a pet?
They're cute. They're like, specifically, they're rainbow millipedes. They've got bright red legs and then like metallic-y, shiny bodies.
Oh wow! And obviously the geckos you probably named, but would like if you have insects as pets, do you name them? Are the millipedes named?
The millipedes are named because they're. So I already have George, who's one of the praying mantises, and then because they're rainbow millipedes, I named them after the other characters from Rainbow, so they're Zippy and Bungle.
Oh, that's brilliant! I love that. Well, thank you to you and your millipedes weren't as intrusive as Jess's dogs. So well done them. So Zippy, George and Bungle, we thank you for your support.
Another wonderful guest, Sarah, that we had there.
Not just one guest, Jess. We also had some millipedes and some geckos.
And didn't you say praying mantis as well?
In the background.
I
so
love
inclusive
that.
We are.
That's what I was staring at. I was staring at the tanks.
While he was talking.
Sarah, I listen with my ears, not with my eyes.
What a way to end. Thanks for listening to the HIV podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please like, rate and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts.
You can now also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the HIV Podcast for behind the scenes insights and video. The HIV Podcast is produced by Thames Valley Positive Support.